I woke up to the sound of the kids bickering downstairs, as usual. Luca had already started his homework, the books scattered across the kitchen table, while Sophia was loudly demanding that I make her pancakes for breakfast. I took a deep breath, trying to shake off the fog of sleep and the familiar weight of the day ahead. My name is Maya, and I'm a 35-year-old mother of two. At least that's how I identify myself. But some days, it feels like I'm just a mom, just someone who moves through the motions, fulfilling everyone else's needs while losing touch with her own. I walked into the kitchen, where Luca was already digging through the fridge for something he could snack on. Sophia was standing by the counter, staring at me with big eyes, waiting for her pancakes. I nodded at her, offering a weak smile. "Morning, sweetie," I said, my voice thick with sleep. Sophia grinned and hugged me around the waist. "Are you going to make pancakes today? I'll make them after I get breakfast for Luca, okay?" I replied, my hand still on the fridge door. "Okay," she beamed, her excitement filling the room. Luca didn't look up. "Mom, can you help me with this math problem?" His voice had a tone of urgency, and I knew what that meant. More pressure. "Luca, just give me a minute. I'll be right there," I said, my fingers numbing as I grabbed the milk carton from the fridge. He didn't respond, but I could feel the weight of his expectation hanging in the air. It wasn't just the math problems. Everything seemed to demand my attention all at once. It was the constant need to be the best mom, the best wife, the best everything. It was overwhelming. I tried not to think about it too much as I poured milk into my coffee mug, my hand shaking slightly. The weight of all the responsibilities in my life, work, kids, marriage, was like an invisible boulder on my chest, and no matter how hard I tried, it never seemed to lighten. I was just about to head to the living room when I heard Adam's voice calling from upstairs. "Maya, are you awake?" I froze for a second before replying, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, just getting the kids breakfast." Adam didn't respond, but I could hear him moving around upstairs. That was Adam, always calm, always steady.
But I knew he was worried about me.
He had been for a while. Lately, I was snapping at him for no reason. I was distant, emotionally exhausted. He kept asking if I was okay, but I didn't have an answer for him. How could I tell him that I felt like I was barely holding on? I heard Luca sigh from the kitchen table. "Mom, I'm stuck on this problem again." I rubbed my temples. "Just a minute, Luca. I'll help you." Sophia's voice called out from the other room. "Mom, can we get ice cream today?" I smiled weakly. Ice cream.it used to be something I could easily say yes to. But now, with everything else piling up, even the thought of taking them out for ice cream felt like an insurmountable task. How could I make that happen when I didn't even have the energy to sit down and finish the paperwork I needed to do? I took a deep breath and pushed those thoughts aside. I had to get it together. I had to be the mom, the wife, the woman everyone expected me to be. "Luca, I'll be right with you," I called out, forcing a smile. And so, I went through the motions, making pancakes, helping Luca with his homework, making promises to Sophia. And through it all, the weight of expectations remained. I couldn't shake it, and no matter how hard I tried, it felt like I was failing. I couldn't keep up with it all. The day had gone by in a blur. A whirlwind of school drop-offs, errands, emails that needed responding to, and kids who never seemed to stop asking for something. As evening approached, the house felt more like a battleground than a sanctuary. The noise, the constant need for attention, the feeling of never being enough, it all collided with me at once. I sat down at the kitchen table, exhausted. The kids were finally in bed after what felt like hours of convincing them to go to sleep. Adam was finishing up some work in the living room. I rubbed my eyes and let out a sigh. I didn't even know where to start. I was so used to being the one who held it all together, but tonight, I felt like I was unraveling. I didn't want to admit it to Adam, but the truth was undeniable. I was overwhelmed. A few minutes later, Adam walked into the kitchen, his eyes soft with concern. "Maya, are you okay?" I shook my head, unable to hold it in any longer. The tears started flowing before I could stop them. "No, I'm not," I whispered. "I'm not okay. I don't know how to do this anymore." Adam's face tightened, and he immediately sat down next to me, pulling me into his arms. "What's going on, Maya?"
Talk to me.
I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, but the words wouldn't stop. I'm exhausted. I'm trying so hard to be everything, to be the perfect mom, the perfect wife, the perfect everything. But I'm failing. I'm failing everyone. Adam's hands were warm on my shoulders as he gently pulled me away, just enough to look me in the eyes. "Maya, you're not failing. You're doing your best. And I'm here. I see everything you're doing, and I'm so grateful for you." I shook my head again, but it's never enough. There's always something more I should be doing. Something I missed. I can't keep up. Adam's eyes softened, and he placed his hand over mine. "It's okay to feel this way. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to be perfect." I closed my eyes, trying to stop the flood of emotions that threatened to overtake me.
Perfect.
That word had been like a ghost, haunting me in every corner of my life. I didn't know how to let go of it. How could I? It felt like the one thing that held everything together. But if I'm not perfect, then what am I? I whispered, almost afraid to ask the question. Adam's voice was gentle, but firm. "You're enough, Maya. You're enough just as you are. And it's okay to ask for help. You don't have to do everything by yourself." I looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in, but I couldn't quite believe them. Enough. How could I feel enough when I was constantly falling short? "Maybe I'm just broken," I said, my voice shaking. "Maybe I'm not meant to handle all this. Maybe I'm just not cut out for it." Adam's grip tightened on my hand. "You're not broken, Maya. You're just human." I let out a small laugh through my tears, a sad sound. I feel so far from human right now. Adam pulled me closer, kissing the top of my head. "Then let me help you. We'll figure this out together." I didn't say anything for a moment, just letting his words settle into the silence of the room. I could feel the tension in my chest starting to ease, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to let go of the pressure yet.
It was so deeply ingrained in me.
This need to be everything. But Adam's words stuck with me long after the conversation ended. "You don't have to be perfect." And slowly, very slowly, the idea started to seep into my mind. Maybe I could stop trying so hard to live up to an impossible ideal. Maybe I could just be me. And that could be enough. The next morning, I woke up with a familiar ache of exhaustion in my bones. The kids were already awake and playing loudly in the living room. The house was full of the usual noise, chaos, and constant demands. But today, for some reason, it felt different. Maybe it was because the conversation with Adam from the night before lingered in my mind. Maybe it was the faint glimmer of hope that I wasn't completely broken. I pulled myself out of bed, trying to push aside the usual worries. As I made my way to the kitchen, I passed the kids' room and saw Lucas sitting at his desk, scribbling something down. Sophia was trying to get his attention, asking him to play with her.
Mom.
Sophia shouted from the hallway, her voice high-pitched with excitement. "Can we go to the park today?" I paused, her request hanging in the air. It wasn't a huge thing taking them to the park. But lately, even small outings felt like an impossible task. I had a million things to do. The laundry, the emails, the cleaning, the groceries, and my mind was constantly buzzing with tasks, with things I should be doing. It was like I couldn't shut it off, even for a moment. I stood there for a moment, conflicted. Part of me wanted to say no, to stay in the safety of the house, where everything felt somewhat manageable. But then I remembered what Adam had said. You don't have to do it all. Maybe today, I didn't have to be perfect. Maybe it was okay to let go for a bit. I walked into the kitchen, smiled at Sophia, and said, "Sure, let's go to the park. Give me 10 minutes. Sophia's face lit up, her excitement contagious. "Yay!" "Thanks, Mom," she squealed, running off to get her shoes. I felt a small sense of relief. It wasn't much, but for the first time in a while, I had made a decision based on what felt good for me, not out of obligation or expectation. I wasn't going to be the perfect mom today. I was just going to be there, present. While Sophia ran around the house gathering her things, I turned to Luca, who had been unusually quiet. His homework was still half finished. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mix of frustration and resignation. "Mom, can you help me with this?" he asked, holding up a sheet of math problems. I sat down beside him at the kitchen table. His face lit up, relieved that I was finally giving him some attention. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel that old pressure to solve everything right away. Instead of rushing through it, I took my time with him, answering his questions slowly, guiding him step by step. "Okay, Luca," I said, "let's break this down together. You don't have to get it perfect on the first try. It's okay to make mistakes." He looked at me, unsure. "But what if I get it wrong?" I smiled softly. "That's the best part of learning. You get to try again." His face relaxed, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was failing him. I was just being with him in the moment, no rush, no pressure. Just us. After we finished the math problems, I kissed him on the forehead and stood up. "Okay, now go get your shoes. We're going to the park." Sophia, of course, was already ready, bouncing around by the front door. The three of us walked outside, and the sun hit my face, warm and inviting. For a second, it felt like everything was okay. Not perfect, but okay. As we made our way to the park, I felt a strange mix of relief and pride. I wasn't running on autopilot anymore. I was letting go of the expectations. I was being a real mom, not the version of myself I had been trying to live up to in my head. At the park, Luca and Sophia ran ahead, laughing and playing like kids do. Adam joined us soon after, his work wrapped up for the day. We sat together on the grass, talking, watching the kids, and just being. There were no big moments of clarity, no grand revelations. But there was a sense of peace that settled over me, a peace that came from simply allowing myself to be present. Not worrying about what I hadn't done, not obsessing over what I still needed to do. And as I watched my children playing, I realized something important. I didn't need to be perfect. I didn't need to live up to anyone else's idea of who I should be. I was enough just as I was. Over the next few days, I found myself making small but significant changes. It wasn't about grand gestures or life-altering decisions, but rather about allowing myself the space to breathe, to exist without the constant pressure to perform at an impossible level. One morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was still quiet, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel rushed. I didn't have that overwhelming weight pressing on my chest. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, looking out the window at the soft morning light. It was strange to feel nothing, no anxiety, no to-do list echoing in my mind. Just the simple joy of the moment. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt this way. Calm, peaceful. As I sipped my coffee, I thought about how I had been living for so long, constantly moving, constantly achieving, constantly measuring myself against some invisible standard of perfection. And for what? To prove that I could handle it all? To show everyone, including myself, that I wasn't weak, that I was capable? But in my pursuit of perfection, I had lost sight of the beauty in the small moments. The quiet moments, the ones where everything didn't have to be perfect. I was interrupted by the sound of Sophia calling from the hallway.
"Mom."
"I can't find my favorite shirt." I smiled to myself. The chaos had returned, but it didn't feel as overwhelming as it used to. I stood up, setting my coffee down, and went to help her. As I helped her look through the laundry pile, I realized something. I didn't mind the mess anymore. In fact, I was starting to embrace it. Sophia found her shirt, grinning as she pulled it out of the pile. "Thanks, Mom. Anytime," I replied, kissing the top of her head. We went through the usual morning routine, but I wasn't rushing through it. I was there with her. I wasn't thinking about the laundry that needed to be folded or the grocery list I had to create. I was just present. When Luca came down, he was in his usual rush, his shoes untied and his backpack half open. "Mom, I can't find my homework," he shouted, looking frantic. I took a deep breath and walked over to him, my hands resting calmly on his shoulders. "Luca, take a breath. We'll find it together." He froze, looking at me as if he'd never seen me this calm before. He had always seen me as the one who kept everything organized, the one who had the answers to all of his problems. But today, I wasn't rushing to fix everything for him. Instead, I sat with him and we slowly retraced his steps until he found the missing assignment. "See," I said, giving him a small smile. "It's not the end of the world. We'll figure it out." Luca looked at me, his face softening. "Thanks, Mom." We were late to school, of course, but it didn't matter as much as it used to. I wasn't frantic. I wasn't feeling that desperate need to control everything. The truth was, life would go on whether we were 5 minutes late or not. The car ride to school was quieter than usual, the radio playing softly in the background. Sophia and Luca were arguing over who got to sit in the front seat, but it wasn't the loud, angry exchange it often turned into. Today, it was just them being kids, bickering, laughing, and arguing like they were supposed to. I dropped them off at school and drove home, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. It wasn't just the change in pace, though. It was the fact that I was beginning to accept myself, not as some idealized version of a mother or wife, but as me. Imperfect, messy, tired, but still enough. When I got home, I didn't dive into work. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table and started writing. I hadn't written in months, years, even. But something about that morning felt like the right time. I wasn't writing for anyone but myself. It was a way to process the things I had been holding inside for so long. I wrote about the pressure to be perfect, the fear of failure, and the exhaustion that came from trying to do it all. But I also wrote about the moments of peace I had begun to find, the small, quiet moments where I didn't have to measure up to anything or anyone. As the afternoon wore on, I felt the weight of the day lift. The pressure wasn't gone completely, but it was lighter, more manageable, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to have everything figured out. I wasn't perfect, and that was okay. The weeks that followed felt like a quiet revolution. The weight I had carried for so long, this need to be perfect, began to dissolve, little by little, like ice melting under the warmth of the sun. I was still the same person, the same mother, the same wife. But I was starting to understand something crucial. I wasn't defined by my ability to do everything right. The changes were subtle at first. I stopped holding myself to an unrealistic standard. I stopped comparing myself to other moms, other wives, other women. I stopped measuring my worth by the number of tasks I could check off in a day or the way I appeared to others. Instead, I started to embrace the mess, the chaos, the imperfections. One evening, I sat on the couch with Adam after the kids had gone to bed, a glass of wine in hand, feeling the weight of the day settle into my bones. I didn't have anything profound to say. We didn't talk about anything deep. We just sat together, quietly, enjoying the simplicity of being with each other. Adam looked over at me, his eyes soft with warmth. "I've noticed a change in you lately. You seem calmer, more at peace." I smiled, a little embarrassed. "I guess I've been trying to let go of a lot of things. The need to be perfect. The need to be everything for everyone all the time." Adam nodded, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You don't have to be perfect, Maya. You never did. We're in this together. And you're already doing enough." I felt a wave of emotion rush through me, but this time, it wasn't overwhelming. It was a quiet sense of relief. For so long, I had believed that I had to carry it all on my own, that if I didn't keep everything in place, everything would fall apart. But Adam's words reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I didn't have to be perfect. "I'm sorry for the way I've been lately," I said, my voice quiet. I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting on myself. "And on you." Adam shook his head gently. "You don't have to apologize. We all go through it. But I'm glad you're letting go of that pressure. I'm here for you. We'll figure this out together." His words were like a balm, soothing the raw places inside me. I had spent so long trying to prove something to myself, to prove that I could handle everything on my own, but I had forgotten that asking for help wasn't a weakness. It was a strength. The next day, I woke up feeling different. Lighter that I didn't have everything figured out, but I didn't need to. I knew that I had my family, my husband, my kids, people who loved me, imperfections and all. I went to the kitchen, where Sophia was already sitting at the table, her hair in a tangled mess from sleeping. She looked up at me, blinking sleepily. Morning, Mom. Morning, sweetie, I said, smiling as I poured her a glass of juice. I could hear Lucas stirring in his room, and I didn't feel the usual rush to get everything ready in time for school. It was okay if we were a little late. It was okay if the house wasn't spotless. It was okay if we didn't have everything planned out. Sophia yawned and stretched, then looked at me, her eyes bright. Are we going to the park today? I smiled. Maybe we can. Let's see how the day goes. I wasn't making any promises. I wasn't setting myself up for failure by trying to meet every expectation. I was simply going to take each moment as it came, without pressure, without guilt. Luca came down a few minutes later, his backpack slung over his shoulder, looking like he had just woken up from a nap. He came over and kissed me on the cheek. Thanks for helping me with my homework yesterday, Mom. It actually wasn't that hard after all. I laughed softly, the sound feeling foreign but pleasant. I'm glad it helped. As the day went on, I felt a growing sense of peace. The little things didn't bother me as much anymore. The mess, the chaos, the things that used to feel like failures, they no longer had the same hold on me. I was letting go. I was giving myself the grace to be imperfect. By the time we got home from school, I was in a good place. We didn't go to the park that day, but that was okay. Instead, I spent time with the kids in the living room, playing games and talking about their day. I was fully present in those moments. I wasn't thinking about what I had to do next. I wasn't thinking about what I hadn't done. And in that space, I realized something else. I didn't need to be perfect. I didn't need to be everything. I just needed to be me. It's funny how life can change so quietly. No big announcement, and oh, dramatic turning point. Just a shift, a small, almost imperceptible change that happens over time. But when I look back on the months that followed that conversation with Adam, I can see it clearly now. I had finally started to let go. I had spent years chasing an impossible standard, believing that I could somehow control every moment, every aspect of my life. But the more I let go, the more I realized that perfection wasn't the point at all. The point was to be present, to embrace the chaos and the mess, to live, not just survive. The kids had gotten used to the new version of me. Not the perfect mom who never made mistakes, but the real mom who could laugh at herself, who made mistakes, who got overwhelmed sometimes, but who was also there, fully there for them, when it mattered most. Sophia had stopped asking for perfection. Instead, she asked for my attention. Mom, can we read that book again? The one with the dinosaurs. Or, can you sit with me while I finish this puzzle? Luca was more relaxed, too. He didn't need me to solve every problem. He needed me to listen. He needed me to help him think through things instead of just fixing them for him. The other day, when he was struggling with a math test, I sat beside him and said, "It's okay to get things wrong. It's okay to struggle. What matters is that you try." And for the first time in a long time, I really meant it. Adam and I had our moments, of course. The balance between work, life, and family was never going to be perfect. We still had our disagreements, our late-night talks about how we could manage everything better. But the pressure to be flawless in our relationship had lifted. We were no longer trying to live up to some ideal version of what a marriage should look like. Instead, we were just focusing on being with each other, on supporting each other. One evening, Adam and I sat on the porch, watching the sunset together. It was the first time in a while that we had spent an uninterrupted evening alone. The kids were staying at a friend's house, and it felt new, not in the sense of excitement, but in the sense that we had finally found our rhythm. We were just two people, two imperfect, flawed, but deeply connected people, sitting side by side, taking in the world around us. Adam took my hand and looked at me. "I'm proud of you, you know that?" I raised an eyebrow, unsure of what he meant. "What for?" "For letting go," he said. "For finally giving yourself the space to just be. It's like I can see you again, really see you, not the version of you trying to do everything right, but the real you." I smiled, feeling warmth flood through me. It's been a long time coming, and then, in that quiet, golden moment, I realized just how far I had come. The burden of perfection had been lifted, and in its place was something much more beautiful: peace. I wasn't perfect, but I didn't need to be. In fact, Perfection was never the goal. The goal was simply to live, to be real, to be present, to embrace the mess and the beauty in everything, even the hard parts. I didn't have to control everything. I didn't have to be everything for everyone. I just had to be me. And for the first time in my life, I was okay with that. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I leaned my head on Adam's shoulder, letting the peace of the moment wash over me. The world was messy, chaotic, and unpredictable. But that was okay, because I had learned something powerful. It was all part of the journey.
And that was enough.